April 15, 1945. British tanks ram the gates of Bergen-Belsen. A wall of stench hits the soldiers. It is physical. It is thick. It is the smell of 13,000 corpses rotting under the spring sun. The air carries a sweet, sickly odor of decay. Battle-hardened men gag. They have seen combat across Europe, but they have never seen this. Piles of bodies stack like firewood. Survivors move like mechanical skeletons, skin stretched tight over bone. 13,000 dead. The living are indistinguishable from the corpses. Children look like withered husks. Hollow eyes stare at nothing. Amidst this geometric scale of horror stands a 21-year-old blonde woman. Her face is symmetrical, almost angelic. Her victims knew her by two names, the beautiful beast and the hyena of Auschwitz. Her name was Irma Grese. The shadow of Irma Grese remains a stain on history. Yet modern systems attempt to erase it. YouTube algorithms act as a digital filter. They flag historical atrocities as non-compliant. The mechanism is simple. Controversy triggers suppression. When a video exposes the dark reality of the camps, the system restricts its reach. Reach drops, visibility vanishes. The financial cost is absolute. Advertisers avoid these topics. This means zero revenue for documenting the truth. Researching Grese requires months of archival verification and emotional endurance. We receive not a single penny for this work. Algorithms bury these stories like archives buried the documents. It is a technical barrier to memory. We refuse to let these chapters die in the digital shadows. Your engagement is the only bypass to this suppression. Smash the subscribe button to keep these truths alive. Ring the notification bell to force the content into your feed. Use the Super Thanks button to fund our fight against historical erasure. Stay with Veiled History and subscribe now. 92,000 murdered. May 1939. The gates of Ravensbrück opened. This was not just a prison. It was a factory of biological decay. 132,000 women passed through these gates. Poles, Russians, Jews, and Roma. The Nazi machine labeled them all undesirable. How does a system process such a mass of human life? Technical precision met primitive cruelty. The camp sat on a swamp. The air stayed thick with the smell of stagnant water and coal smoke. Prisoners lived in overcrowded wooden barracks. They stood on the appel plots for hours in the biting wind. Behind the wire, the hierarchy was clear. Male SS guards held the perimeter. Inside, 150 women took control. These female guards came for two reasons. Some were fanatics, others just wanted the paycheck. In wartime Germany, the SS offered better food and higher wages than any factory. Many arrived with no ideology. They left as killers. The camp served a dual purpose. It functioned as a slaughterhouse and a finishing school for the SS. Ravensbrück was both a site of mass execution and the primary training facility for female guards. Ravensbrück was the final stage, the factory of death. But the machine of the Third Reich began its work much earlier, in ordinary classrooms and quiet farmhouses. October 7, 1923, Recken, Germany. Irma Grese entered the world as the third of 5 children. Her parents, Alfred and Berta, were simple dairy workers. There was no mark of a monster, no omen of the whip. The conflict started at the dinner table. Alfred Grese was a man of the old world. He despised the Nazi Party. He hated everything Adolf Hitler represented. While the neighbors' children marched in the Hitler Youth, Alfred issued a silent decree. His children were forbidden from joining. Irma watched from the window. Her friends wore the uniforms. They sang the songs of the League of German Girls. She wanted the belonging. Her father gave her isolation. But the state was louder than the father. Propaganda seeped through the floorboards of the schoolhouse. Teachers abandoned mathematics for racial hygiene. Education became a ritual of worship. In every classroom, a portrait of Adolf Hitler hung on the wall. It was placed higher than the crucifix. The message was clear. The state was the new god. Textbooks rebranded humanity. Jews were described as subhuman parasites. Warfare was stripped of its horror and dressed in glory. The highest virtue was no longer kindness or faith. It was absolute obedience to authority. Irma sat at her desk. She looked at the portrait above the cross. Day after day, she drank the poison of these toxic lessons. 1936. While Berlin prepared for the Olympic Games, the Grese family was collapsing. 13-year-old Irma watched the final fragments of her childhood vanish. Her mother Berta discovered the truth. Her husband, Alfred, was having an affair with the daughter of a local pub owner. Betrayal turned into a death sentence. Berta Grese could not endure the humiliation. She took her own life. What remains for a child when the mother is in a grave and the father becomes a tyrant? Guilt mutated into rage. Alfred Grese, a devout Christian, replaced grief with an iron fist. He reached for the leather belt for any minor infraction. The whistle of the strap cut through the silence of the house. Home was no longer a refuge. It was a site of systematic violence. The school offered no escape. Classmates targeted Irma with relentless brutality. They mocked her. They tormented her daily. Her grades plummeted as she struggled to focus. She failed subject after subject. Isolation became her only defense. The pressure reached a breaking point. At the age of 14, Irma Grese walked away from the classroom and dropped out. Dropping out didn't bring peace, it brought a void. For 3 years, Irma Grese drifted through the bottom of the German economy. 6 months of backbreaking labor on a farm. Another 6 months behind a retail counter in Leichen. Customers looked past her. The world remained indifferent to the girl who had already lost everything. She was a nobody, invisible and powerless. In 1939, the drift stopped. The 15-year-old found work at the Hohenleichen Sanatorium. She became an assistant nurse. It was her first brush with authority. For 2 years, she followed the orders of the medical superintendent, Dr. Karl Gebhardt. Hohenleichen looked like a legitimate health facility. At the time, Gebhardt focused on orthopedic surgery and sports injuries. He treated elite athletes and high-ranking officials. Irma watched a professional at work. The transition was quiet. Gebhardt was already a favorite of the Nazi inner circle. Irma saw a respected healer, not the future architect of human vivisection. She had no idea she was training under a man who would later become one of the most notorious doctors in the Third Reich. The girl and the doctor worked in silence. Hohenleichen was supposed to be her escape. Irma studied. She pushed against her own academic limits. She wanted the white coat and the respect that came with it. But the system had no place for her. Why did the state reject her help, only to later embrace her hatred? In 1941, the dream died. Administrators looked at her grades and saw a failure. They denied her nursing qualification. Irma was 17. Instead of medicine, she got the dairy farm in Fürstenberg. No surgical steel, just the cold, heavy iron of a butter churn. She spent her days operating machines, mindless labor, manual work. The girl who wanted to heal was now just a cog in a milk factory. Every turn of the handle crushed her aspirations. She had been bullied at school, beaten at home. Now she was professionally discarded. She possessed no influence. She held zero power. Irma Grese owned nothing and controlled no one. Power was only 23 miles away. While Irma Grese labored on the dairy farm in Fürstenberg, the gates of Ravensbrück stood open. It was July 1942. The distance between the churned butter and the machinery of death was a 30-minute drive. The SS needed guards. They specifically targeted young women with no prospects and high resentment. The offer was simple: a uniform, a salary, and absolute authority. An SS female guard earned over 180 Reichsmarks per month. This doubled the wages of an average factory worker. For an 18-year-old girl with no education and a failed nursing career, the choice was logical. The system that once rejected her now offered her a weapon. Irma applied immediately. The SS accepted her without hesitation. She left the mud of the farm for the black polish of the boots. In late July, Irma Grese arrived at the gates of the camp. Beyond the gates of Ravensbrück lay a specialized training facility for female guards. Irma Grese did not find a classroom there, She found a factory for dehumanization. How do you turn a human into a beast in 21 days? Dorothea Binns provided the answer. She was the head overseer. Her black boots struck the gravel of the parade ground with rhythmic precision. Binns did not teach logistics or administration. She taught the school of violence. The curriculum was simple. One lesson: total clarity. Prisoners are not people. They are subhuman slaves. Recruits watched as Binns transformed words into actions. A hesitation meant a blow. A plea for mercy meant an escalation. Binns demanded that guards extract every ounce of labor before the inevitable death of the prisoner. Grese watched. She absorbed. The transition was surgical. Yesterday, Irma was a failed farmhand and an assistant nurse. Today, she was a cog in a machine of genocide. She traded her peasant rags for the tailored SS uniform. The fabric felt heavy. The power felt intoxicating. But Binns was only the first architect of her new reality. Irma soon encountered a familiar face from the Hohenlichen sanatorium. The true education in evil began under Dr. Karl Gebhardt. The training in Ravensbrück changed its focus. Irma Grese met a familiar face from the Hohenlichen sanatorium. Dr. Karl Gebhardt had transformed the women's camp into a private laboratory. The mechanics of science here were simple and brutal. An SS doctor took a heavy hammer. He struck the legs of a healthy Polish prisoner until the bones shattered. The sound of the hammer breaking the femur echoed through the ward. This was the first stage of the protocol. Next came the infection. Doctors took cultures of Clostridium perfringens, the bacteria of gas gangrene. They added Clostridium tetani and Staphylococcus. These strains were forced into the open, jagged wounds. Gebhardt wanted to simulate a battlefield injury. He needed to test the efficacy of sulfonamide. The subjects received no relief. The bacteria consumed the muscle tissue while the patients remained fully conscious. Agony was the only constant. Most died within days. The survivors faced a different fate. If the infection stopped, the limb was often useless. Amputation followed. Gebhardt moved to more complex procedures. He ordered bone, muscle, and nerve transplantations. Surgeons cut sections of living tissue from one woman to graft them onto another. They were looking for a way to repair German soldiers on the front lines. The laboratory lacked basic medical standards. Every incision and every extraction happened without proper anesthesia. Gebhardt's assistants held the screaming women down with leather straps. In 1942, the medical wing of Ravensbrück received specialized equipment for human experimentation. The transition from a prison to a laboratory was mechanical. Doctors treated the operating table like an assembly line. Irma Grese, only 18 years old, stood by the instruments. Did the doctors use anesthesia? In 100% of cases, the answer was no. The process was purely technical. Grese's job was to hand over the tools: steel trays, scalpels, bone saws. She watched as doctors cut through living tissue. She heard the screech of the surgical saw hitting the femur. The sound of metal on bone filled the room. The sterilization program operated with industrial precision. The primary targets were Roma women and children. Doctors injected caustic chemicals directly into reproductive organs. They used massive doses of radiation for X-ray castration. The exposure levels exceeded safety norms by 500 times. Victims remained alive, but their bodies were ruined. They became sterile tools for the Reich's labor force. The brutality reached its peak with the pregnant prisoners. Women in their 7th or 8th month faced forced abortions. If a baby was born alive, the end was immediate: a lethal injection, or simply exposure to the cold. Grese assisted throughout these procedures. She watched the wounds. She monitored the spread of gas gangrene through the open incisions. The sight of gangrenous tissue no longer triggered Irma's gag reflex. It triggered questions from her father, Alfred Grese. She returned home in March 1943. She did not hide her work. Irma spoke casually of supervising prisoners at Ravensbrück. She described the screams of pregnant women. She detailed the beatings that ended in miscarriages. To her, it was a professional routine. To Alfred, it was the end of his daughter. The silence of the house broke. Alfred reached for his leather belt. It was the same strap he had used for years to enforce discipline. Now, it was a weapon of desperation. The leather whistled through the air. The strikes were vicious. He screamed at her to leave. He banned her from his sight forever. Irma did not break. She did not repent. The violence she received at home matched the violence she inflicted at the camp. Her father's rejection acted as a catalyst. It severed her last link to a civilized world. She was no longer a daughter. She was an instrument of the state. The family tie dissolved into blood and leather. She left the house without looking back. Isolation provided a new kind of freedom. There were no more moral anchors, no more domestic restraints. Only the hunger for absolute authority remained. She received the official order for her next assignment. Irma Grese packed her bags and headed for the train station. In March 1943, a train pulled into the station at Auschwitz-Birkenau. The platform was the threshold of an industrial slaughterhouse. If Ravensbrück was a school for violence, this was the factory. The complex operated on a scale that defied military logic. Construction started in October 1941. The original plan, a camp for 125,000 prisoners of war. But the blueprint changed. How many people can a single facility contain? 125,000. This was the population of a medium-sized European city. By March 1942, the site became the operational core of the final solution. This was not a prison. It was a machine for the systematic extraction of life. The geography was a grid of terror. 10 separate sectors, miles of electrified barbed wire fences, guard towers, armed SS patrols with trained attack dogs. Birkenau was the largest killing facility in human history. The chimneys of the crematoriums dominated the horizon. They operated 24 hours a day. Day and night, smoke obscured the sun. The air smelled of burnt grease and chemicals. Human beings were raw material. The output was ash. Irma Grese stepped into this mechanism. She saw the hierarchy of the camp. She saw the absolute helplessness of the masses. For the first time, she possessed total power over life and death. The sensation was not horror. It was ecstatic joy. Irma Grese felt the weight of her uniform and the stillness of the electrified wire. The tool of her control was a custom-made whip. Braided leather, heavy, professional. Why wrap a whip in thin, clear cellophane? Grese did it for efficiency. The plastic layer prevented blood from soaking into the expensive leather. One wipe with a damp cloth, and the weapon was clean. It remained slick and ready for the next shift. Irma took her position at the camp gates every morning. She watched the work parties leave. She waited for them to return. The prisoners were skeletons in striped rags. Grese was a study in contrast. Tailored SS uniform, polished boots, perfect hair. The beatings followed a cold, mechanical rhythm. There was no provocation, no broken rules, just the whistle of the leather cutting the air. Even the beast of Belsen, Commandant Joseph Kramer, noticed the excess. He was a man who managed gas chambers with bureaucratic indifference, yet he ordered Grese to stop. He claimed her brutality crossed a line, even for Auschwitz. Irma ignored the command. She continued to strike faces and backs until the cellophane glistened. Her primary targets were the weakest. She hunted women who tried to smuggle a single potato or a crust of bread. Grese struck them for the crime of trying to survive one more day. Those who survived the cellophane-wrapped whip faced the morning procedure of systematic destruction. It began in the dark. At 3 o'clock in the morning, the sirens broke the silence of the barracks. Thousands of shadows crawled into the mud for the roll call. The process lasted 6 hours. From 3 until 9 o'clock in the morning, prisoners stood frozen. Rain, snow, or scorching heat changed nothing. Movement was a death sentence. To sway was to invite a blow. 6 hours of immobility at sub-zero temperatures trigger irreversible hypothermia. The blood slows. The heart falters. But the guards demanded statues. Grese introduced a technical refinement to the torture. She selected victims and forced them to lift heavy stones. They held them with arms fully extended above their heads. Physics worked against the starved body. Lactic acid burned through the muscle fibers. Gravity pulled the stones down. When the arms inevitably dropped, Grese moved in. She used her heavy boots and her whip to finish what exhaustion started. British troops entered the camp on April 17, 1945. The hyena of Auschwitz, the beautiful beast. These nicknames define the paradox of the woman in the heavy boots. By April 17, 1945, prisoners recognized the pattern. Irma Grese walked through the mud of the barracks. Her blonde hair remained perfectly styled. Her blue eyes stayed clear and innocent. This was the face of an angel on the body of a predator. Gisela Pearl, a Jewish doctor in the camp, watched her closely. Pearl spent her nights performing secret abortions to save women from the gas chambers. She documented the pathology of their tormentor. To Pearl, Grese was one of the most beautiful women in the world. Her lines were perfect. Her gaze was gay and bright. How could a face so pure mask such a void? The contrast was a clinical observation of psychopathy. As a child, Irma was a coward. Her sister Helene remembered a girl who ran from every fight. She was a perpetual victim. In the camp, the power dynamic inverted. Grese stood over thousands of starving women. They could not fight back. They could only endure. This power triggered an ecstatic joy in her. She realized the prisoners were physically incapable of striking her. She responded with every cruelty her imagination could produce. Dr. Pearl noted that Grese's beauty made the horror worse. It was a biological mask. The doctor concluded that Irma Grese was the most depraved, cruel, and imaginative pervert she had ever encountered. The angelic face provided no sanctuary when British troops entered Bergen-Belsen on April 17, 1945. 2 days after liberation, the illusion of German authority collapsed. Soldiers moved through the barracks. They found the hyena among the ruins. The British arrested Irma Grese alongside Joseph Kramer and dozens of other SS personnel. Did she feel the weight of the dead? An English journalist confronted her during an interview. He asked why she committed such atrocities. Grese showed no shame, no remorse. She stated it was her duty to exterminate antisocial elements to ensure Germany's future. The Belsen trial opened on September 17, 1945. It was a legal milestone. For the first time, the Allies tried female camp guards on the same footing as men. Witnesses took the stand. Survivors who endured her heavy boots and her whip. They detailed specific crimes. Grese listened with cold indifference. She dismissed every testimony. To her, the victims were liars. She claimed they were making an elephant out of a small fly. Grese admitted to some beatings. She denied every murder. The British military tribunal watched her transparent performance. They didn't believe a single word. On November 17, 1945, the court reached a verdict: guilty on all charges. The judge read the sentence of death. 26 days passed between the sentence and the end. On December 13, 1945, Irma Grese met the most efficient executioner in Britain. Albert Pierpoint arrived at Hameln Prison. The protocol was mechanical. Pierpoint had executed over 400 people. He took pride in his timing. Death usually arrived in 10 to 15 seconds, no more. Grese entered the room. She was 22 years old. Pierpoint stepped closer. He placed the white hood over her head. Then the hemp noose. The coarse rope settled against her skin. Did she pray? No. Grese spoke one final word: Schnell. Quickly. The executioner pulled the lever. The heavy wooden trapdoor swung open with a violent crack. Gravity did the rest. The hyena of Auschwitz dropped into the darkness. Her neck snapped instantly. The beautiful beast was a corpse. She remains the youngest woman executed under British law in the entire 20th century. Justice was served in 1945, but today, the truth about these crimes faces a different executioner. Gray icons, zero revenue, no ads. The YouTube algorithm systematically buries this footage. It labels these facts not advertiser-friendly, too graphic, too disturbing, too real for the platform's sanitized standards. We receive exactly $0 for this video. But veil history will not stop. These stories must exist. The victims deserve a witness. The perpetrators deserve exposure. Evil thrives only when the record is deleted. If you are still watching, you understand the cost of silence. Support the mission. Hit the subscribe button. Ring the notification bell. Share this link on Facebook, X, and Reddit. Every view is a strike against censorship. If you can, use the super thanks button below. Even $1 keeps this channel operational. Tell us in the comments, which suppressed historical event should we investigate next? We are Veiled History. We uncover what they want forgotten. Click the subscribe button now.